Can you roast coffee in an oven? In this video, we're going to find out, and it's a supplementary video from the previous one wherein we roasted coffee on a stove. Check it out. Hi again everybody, this is David, and here we are exploring more ways to roast coffee from home. Again, these are green coffee beans that we're going to try to roast from our house rather than using a stovetop like we did in my other video. I'll leave a link on top and at the bottom of the description. For this video, we're going to try to roast coffee using an oven. Specifically, I'm going to use my wife's convection baking oven. This is a commercial unit. However, we're not using these toaster oven type things because they're too small and it will burn easily. So this is a full convection oven, meaning it doesn't have a heating element. It uses two big fans at the back of the oven. What it does is it heats up the oven from the back and it blows air all around. So it circulates the air. It allows very, very even temperature from top to bottom. So it doesn't really matter which layer you put it. And you can actually put several trays if you want to do this in bigger batches. Specifically for me, I'm just going to try using one tray right now. I'm just going to use one batch. So that will be approximately around 250 to 300 grams of coffee if I'm not mistaken. So for this oven, I actually need to use this flat tray instead of the black just because it doesn't fit in the tray. So just like the previous video, here's the basic stuff that I'm using. I have a tray where the beans go, and this is raw green coffee beans. I also have this baking tray that I'm going to use as a cooling tray after, and then I have this IKEA colander that's for me to remove the chaff and the little bitty grain stuff, and of course this funnel thing that I use to scoop the beans. So we're going to preheat the oven, so I'm going to set this at roughly 240 degrees. If you're using a non-convection one, you can probably turn it up to 250, 260. And then for the timer, I'm just going to turn it to, 60 minutes, whatever. The whole process shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes at the most. But you still need to preheat it anyway, so I'm just going to leave it on to around 25 minutes or so. While we're waiting for that, let's prepare our coffee. So I'm going to measure out how much coffee we're going to use. Again, I'm using this green coffee from my usual coffee provider. These are Brazilian beans. These are green beans. Again, they are not roasted. They are not pre-roasted. Neither are they decaf, right? So they're just basic beans. Normally I would still go through all the sifting and taking out the bad beans, the Quakers, etc., etc. But for the sake of this video, let's just measure it out and get started with the roasting. So apparently I'm going to pour out roughly 450, I think, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm actually going all the way up to 500 grams of coffee for this batch. That's usually a lot more than I usually roast. I usually roast no more than 400 or 450, but let's just go with 500 because we're using a relatively big tray, and let's see how this one goes. So again, 500 grams of green coffee. We're just going to try to pour it on the pan as evenly as possible. And this might not, come up perfect, obviously, especially with this tray that is a little bit bent already. You're not really seeking perfection in terms of flatness, but you just want to make sure that everything is kind of spread out evenly. And also, not have a lot of high mounds. A little bit of a tip as well is that while you're doing this, since the tray is so huge anyway, it's a good time to pick out really cracked beans, the Quakers, the one with the bug infestations or whatever it might be. You might as well do it if you have the time, but if you're not that finicky about it, just go ahead and skip it and just go straight to the next part. I'm going to cut it off right now. So as you can see right now, I'm just gently patting the top of the beans just to get rid of any excess mounds. and then you can give the whole tray a little quick tap to even things out. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's take a look at close-up and how this looks in terms of evenness. So here you see the beans are relatively flat. I would say that they're no more than two stacks, meaning there are no more than two beans on top of each other. Yes, ideally you want one bean specifically, but that's pretty much impossible. So at this point, the oven is pretty much preheated, where the oven is around 220 degrees or so, not yet at the 250 mark that we want, but it's okay. I'm just doing this to kind of like remove the moisture from the beans for now, because it is quite humid where I live. And as you can see, it started at around 317 at the moment, so we're just gonna let it run. And what happens here right now, we're just removing most of the moisture on the beans themselves. And I'm gonna use a timer and essentially set the initial stage, this initial stage, to around 3 minutes. This is just like the drying stage, while the oven also heats up to the ideal roasting temperature that I mentioned earlier, which is around 250 degrees centigrade. If you guys are using Fahrenheit, please ask Google, because I don't do Fahrenheit. So here's a close-up of what you can see. Not much really happens other than some of the chaff starting to separate from some of the beans. So again, you can use a spatula to kind of stir it around, after 3 minutes, just to make sure they're a little even. But I can show you why that's not a good idea to do with a convection oven, because again, the wind is blowing pretty hard with a convection oven. If you have a regular household oven where the fan is not that strong, or usually the fan is pointing sideways, I don't think you'll have an issue spinning it around. But as soon as I open this, you can see the shaft is like blowing all over the place at the moment. So you can pretty much guarantee that your kitchen will be a bit of a mess, as well as the fan starting to have some shaft being stuck onto it. So I decided not to do this more than once. As you can see, the shaft is like flying inside like a crazy popcorn at the moment. So we're just gonna let this be. The oven is pretty much reaching that temperature that we want pretty soon. So I'm gonna come back and show you how it goes after a few minutes. So after that initial 3 minutes of removing the moisture from the beans, this is how it looks. So I turned off the oven for now, because the oven pretty much retains a lot of heat anyway, and I don't want stuff to fly all over the place. And here's how the beans look after the initial phase. So here are how the beans look after the humidifying phase. You can see that most of the beans are still relatively whitish. It's no longer green, but I also kind of noticed that the beans at the edges are turning brown a lot faster actually than the ones in the middle. What you see in the dark part on the right is not really tan brown beans. It's just the lighting at the moment. But if you can see that if I mix it up, so it's really not. It's really just the lighting, but. In terms of evenness, it is not that even, simply because the sides tend to heat up a bit more than the middle. I think for anybody who bakes brownies and things like that, you probably know that is pretty much a standard phenomenon for anything in the oven. So I would suggest that the next time if you're gonna try this with your oven, try to avoid like the first 2 inches at the edge of your tray and just go in the middle, or maybe even like thin out the middle part and make the sides a little thicker, but still avoid like the inch, the 1 inch or couple of cm within the edge of your oven, just to be sure. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the shaft mess with a convection oven. I have shaft all over the place. I have shaft all over my oven, and I guess it's not really that pleasant, especially if you've already nailed down how to do it on the stove very cleanly. I get to confine most of my shaft issues, and I'm roasting on the stove, into only when I'm trying to remove the shaft on the sink. So in this case, I don't have a lot of control where the shaft goes. And this is a big reason why I think it might be easier if you're not using a commercial or a pure convection oven like this one. But having said that, this is a lot less stirring, a lot less heat monitoring, a lot less having to be careful that the bottom of your beans are not getting burnt before the top, because in essence you're putting 1.5 layers of beans only. And right now we have been roasting the beans for around 12 minutes, and the beans are still relatively evenly tanned at the moment. You're not really seeing the same amount of discrepancies you'd see in a pan roasting, wherein some are a lot more roasted than the other. And I think that's a main advantage of doing this on the in the oven rather than on a pan, especially if you're a beginner and you don't mind cleaning up a bit. I think the oven is not a bad way to go. So right now I think we are at earlier we're at 7 to 8 minutes or so, and then I'm gonna stop this right now and take a look at how it goes. The other issue is with an oven, I can't really hear whether I have reached first crack or not. You can see that there's still quite a lot of steam and heat coming out of the bean surfaces themselves. So let's take a look whether or not we have actually reached first crack or not. So this is close to the 8-minute mark or so. The beans are quite uniformly brown at the moment, and the shaft are already starting to peel off quite evenly. I'm gonna kind of like mix it up just to see where everything goes at the moment. But in general, they're pretty even. But again, like what I mentioned earlier, the edges seem to be browning a little bit more. So kind of made the decision to just let it be rather than fiddle around with it too much. And just checking whether or not the bottom part is very unroasted versus the top. And so far, based on what I see, it's pretty even, I guess, because the bottom of the tray gets hot as well, so the discrepancy of the heat is not as big as, for example, you're using a stove top, where in the top part pretty much do not have any direct contact with heat, other than the heat escaping from the bottom. This one is a little bit reversed, wherein the heat is pretty even from all four sides, and the top part probably is getting a little bit more heat than the bottom part because of the metal tray transfer. So I'm going to put this back in the oven right now and see how long it will take before everything turns evenly brown to the first crack, because based on the colors of this right now, we're not at the first crack yet. I don't want it to cool too much. All right, we'll be right back. So back to the oven you guys go, and hello again to all the dancing shafts. Again, I told you this is quite a bit of a mess with a big oven fan. So I'm gonna get my timer again. I'm gonna reset this and maybe choose like around 6 minutes just to add. So we were at sorry. So anyway, I'm gonna put 6 minutes back on the clock, so that will add up our total to roughly around 15 to 17 minutes so far in the oven. Actually around 15 minutes if we take out the time that we stirring and filming the tray outside of the oven. So if you actually kept it in the oven and not touch everything, this should be around the 12-minute mark. And as you can see, with just a couple of minutes to go with the 6-minute timer, the beans are actually roasting pretty well. They're pretty even, they're pretty nicely colored, and there aren't a lot of inconsistencies in terms of beans that are not roasted and beans that are over roasted. This is, in terms of results, this is actually not bad. I think if your oven has a top broiler, or a top whatever the heating element is on top, and then you put the tray as low as possible, you might be able to get a better result than this. And as you can see right now, it has roughly been around 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, around 25 minutes, simply because we, took the tray in and out twice, which each one of them took around 3 minutes probably. So don't really think that it takes 25, 30 minutes. It really doesn't. It only takes like 15 minutes at the most. So right now, I have less than 2 minutes left, and you can take a look at the beans. They are going pretty well. The colors are nice, and let me take it out and show it to you what the results are before we continue. There's going to be a lot of smoke, so be careful. So, the house smells amazing in terms of coffee. However, again, you probably know by now that the mess is probably something that I would avoid doing. And I don't think you'll have the same issue if you use non-commercial oven. So let's just take a look. Based on the exposure of the camera, this seems a little light, so I'm going to fix this a bit to a more accurate color on post. But in general, you can see that, just see the color grades and just the shades between the beans. They're quite even, and I'm quite happy with that, to be honest. So here is how the more natural look of the color of the beans are. Like I said, the edges tend to be a little darker than the ones in the middle, but it's not too bad. You can see that the real border edge beans are pretty much at city roast, dark medium level, while the rest are still in like light roast, light medium roast or something. I would probably, if I actually took out, didn't put the beans close to the edge, I think, this putting it inside continuously without taking it out and fiddling with it for 15 to 18 minutes, I think would be perfect. Because I took it out several times and I didn't, spread it out as evenly, you can see some of the beans at the bottom pile might not be that roasted, but they're still roasted, but they're a bit more on the lighter side than I would like for espresso especially, or even drip, so yeah. That's how it kind of looks like. And like I mentioned, there are certain beans that gets burned a lot more. These are the ones that are most likely touching the edge and corners of the tray. So it's only one or two. They don't really have to worry too much about it. In general, the beans are relatively balanced in terms of roasting consistency. But like what I said earlier, try not to take it out of the oven, and just let it be for at least 15 to 18 minutes. And here we go again. I want to show you all the mess that is in the oven that would drive my wife crazy if she sees this. So but it's not that hard to clean, to be honest. You just let it cool, get a brush, vacuum it out, or just brush it out. It's not sticky or anything, nothing is burnt. So now we go through the whole same phase of removing the excess chaff, but you know that a lot of the chaff already blew out, right? So surprisingly, there's not as much chaff than the stovetop method. But I am also facing this problem with this shallow baking tray. It's really quite hard transferring it to the colander as compared to a pan. I think with the pan, because of the circumference of the pan, is pretty much identical to the colander. It's really easy to just pour it in and then sift it. Right now, this is taking quite a bit of effort, and this is quite annoying. And this is another point why I will probably not do this again, because it's just a lot of work. All right, so that is what it is, so I'm just going to go through my same flipping and tossing thing. For more information, look at my previous video with the pan roasting again. That will be a more useful video for this, and I don't want to waste your time any further, so I'll cut this right now. So again, this is the final product. It's not bad. It honestly isn't that bad. Again, it could use a few more minutes in the in the oven, but for what it is and the amount of effort put in to the actual roasting process, this is not too bad. So let's try making a couple of shots of espresso from this. By the time I'm doing this, the beans have actually gassed out for roughly 4 days or so, 5 days, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just take a look. I'm doing my standard 18 grams at grinder setting 6.5, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm using the 3D dose grinder that I absolutely love. Again, link in the video right now or in the description below if I remember to put it. So yeah, I love this thing because it just cuts down so much work for me in terms of cleanliness and just consistency. And as you can see, the roast is not that dark, so it is pretty much like medium at best, right? So it's not going to be that strong, and I'm not really quite sure how the crema would be. This is literally the first time I'm making the coffee out of the oven roasted beans. So let's take a quick look and give it a tap. And this is pretty much just a standard routine that I'm doing. Unfortunately, I think my temper is a little damp. So here we go. My airflow sensor is not working for the past couple of years, so I'm just using manual programming. Put the cup in, tear it out, and press the program button. 2 cup, and let's see how it goes. So here we go. Let me try to hold the phone as hard as, oh, it doesn't look bad. You know, it's nice, creamy. It's nice and thick. It looks great. It doesn't have a lot of variance in terms of output. I think it's still a little bit too fresh. It probably needs a day or two more to gas out, because I think it came out a little quick. 28 seconds. All right, so yeah, I think I stopped it a little early as well, 32 rather than 36. So I guess it's pretty much okay, you know. So you can see the crema is nice. It's nice and thick. It actually smells great, you know. So I wish I can tell you how it tastes as an espresso, but I'll be lying to you if I tell you that I know how to differentiate a good one or not. As long as it's not sour, I'm happy. So I wouldn't want to inject too much opinion over whether or not the extracted coffee was good. But I did try a shot, you know, just tasted another shot after making this video, and it's not too bad. Like I said, I think it could use another day or two in terms of gassing out before using it, or it might really need, you know, 2 or 3 more minutes in the oven, because it's relatively light. So I would expect it to be a little bit more acidic and not as much of the typical Brazil bean body that I'm used to for this roast, right? So, but in general, I can't really complain in terms of output. To make 500 grams and relatively not having to stir all day and deal with the heat, you know, of the oven, and again, that takes a bit of skill, because I've been roasting my own beans on the pan for like over probably like close to 2 years now. So for me, that's pretty much a much easier way for me. But as you can see, you know, the crema holds. This isn't bad. You know, I wouldn't rule it out. So if you have an oven that is not commercialized, give it a shot. It might work out for you. All right, that's all I have. Please give this video a like. It really helps the channel a lot. Until then, see you later.